Chapter 4. What Books and Burials Tells Us. Mary in the library. As the bell rang, the teacher asked the students to follow him because they were going to the library for the first time. When Mary stepped inside, she found that the library was much larger than their classroom, and there were so many shelves, all full of books. In one corner was a cupboard filled with large old volumes. Seeing her trying to open the cupboard, the teacher said that cupboard was very special books on different religions. Did you know that we have a set of the Vedas? What are the Vedas? Mary wondered. Let us find out. One of the oldest books in the world. You may have heard about the Vedas. There are four of them: Rigveda, Samveda, Yajurveda, and Atharveda. The oldest Veda is the Rigveda, composed about 3500 years ago. The Rigveda includes more than 1,000 hymns called sukta or well said. These hymns are in praise of various gods and goddesses. Three gods are especially important: Agni, the god of fire; Indra, a warrior god; and Soma, a plant from which a special drink was prepared. These hymns were composed by sages, rishis, priests taught students to recite and memorize each syllable, word, and sentence, bit by bit, with great care. Most of the hymns were composed, taught, and learned by men. A few were composed by women. The Rigveda is in Old or Vedic Sanskrit, which is different from the Sanskrit you learn in school these days. Sanskrit and other languages. Sanskrit is a part of a family of languages known as Indo-European. Some Indian languages such as Assami, Gujarati, Hindi, Kashmiri and Sindhi. Asian languages such as Persian and many European languages such as English, French, German, Greek, Italian and Spanish belong to this family. They are called a family because they originally had words in common. Take the words Matra Sanskrit, Ma Hindi, and Mother English. Do you notice any similarities? Other languages used in the subcontinent belong to different families. For instance, those used in the northeast belong to the Tibeto-Burman family. Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam belong to Dravidian family, and the languages spoken in Jharkhand and parts of central India belong to the Austro-Asiatic family. List the languages you have heard about and try and identify the families to which they belong. The books we use are written and printed. The Rig Veda was recited and heard rather than read. It was written down several centuries after it was first composed and printed less than 200 years ago. How historians study the Rig Veda. Historians, like archaeologists, find out about the past, but in addition to material remains, they examine written sources as well. Let us see how they study the Rig Veda. Some of the hymns in the Rig Veda are in the form of dialogues. This is part of one such hymn, a dialogue between a sage named Vishwamitra and two rivers, Bir and Satluj, that were worshipped as goddess. Find the rivers on map 1, page 2, then read on cattle, horses, and chariots. There are many prayers in the Rigveda for cattle, children, especially sons, and horses. Horses were yoked to chariots that were used in battles which were fought to capture cattle. Battles were also fought for land, which was important for pasture and for growing hardy crops that ripen quickly, such as barley. Some battles were fought for water and to capture people. Some of the wealth that was obtained was kept by the leaders. Some was given to the priests and the rest was distributed among the people. Some wealth was used for performance of yagnas or sacrifices in which offerings were made into the fire. These were meant of gods and goddess. Offerings could include ghee, grain, and in some cases animals. Most men took part in these wars. There was no regular army, but there were assemblies where people met and discussed matters of war and peace. They also chose leaders who were often brave and skillful warriors. Words to describe people. There are several ways of describing people in terms of the work they do, the language they speak, the place they belong to, their family, their communities, and cultural practices. Let us see some of the words used to describe people found in the Rigveda. There are two groups who are described in terms of their work: the priests, sometimes called Brahmins, who perform various rituals, and the Rajas. These rajas were not like the ones you will be learning about later. They did not have capital cities, palaces, or armies, nor did they collect taxes. Generally, sons did not automatically succeed fathers as rajas. Read the previous section once more and see whether you can find out what the rajas did. Two words were used to describe the people or the community as a whole. One was the word jana, which we still use in Hindi and other languages. The other was wish. The word Vaishya comes from wish. You will learn more about this chapter 5. Several wish or are mentioned by name, so we find references to the Purujana or wish, the Bharata Jana or wish, the Yadujana or wish, and so on. Do any of these names sound familiar? Sometimes the people who composed the hymns described themselves as Aryas and called their opponents Dasas or Dasis. These were people who did not perform sacrifices and probably spoke different languages. Later, the term Dasa and the feminine Dasi came to mean slave. Slaves were women and men who were often captured in war. They were treated as the property of their owners, who could make them do whatever work they wanted. While the Rigveda was being composed in the northwest of the subcontinent, there were other developments elsewhere. Let us look at some of these. Silent Sentinels, the story of the Megaliths. Look at the illustration on the next page. These stone boulders are known as megaliths, literally big stones. These were carefully arranged by people and were used to mark burial sites. The practice of erecting megaliths began about 3000 years ago and was prevalent throughout the Deccan, South India in the northeast, and Kashmir. Some important megalith sites are shown on map to page 13. While some megaliths can be seen on the surface, other megalith burials are often underground. Sometimes archaeologists find a circle of stone boulders or a single large stone standing on the ground. These are the only indications that there are burials beneath. There were several things that people did to make megaliths. We have made a list here. Try and arrange them in the correct order: digging pits in the earth, transporting stones, breaking boulders, placing stones in positions, finding suitable stones, shaping stones, burial the dead. All these burials have some common features. Generally, the dead were buried with distinctive pots, which are called black and red ware. Also found are tools and weapons of iron and sometimes skeletons of horses, horse equipment, and ornaments of stone and gold. Was iron used in the Harappan cities? Finding out about social differences. Archaeologists think that objects found with a skeleton probably belong to the dead person. Sometimes more objects are found in one grave than in another. Find Brahmagiri on map to page 13. Here, one skeleton was buried with 33 gold beads, 2 stone beads, 4 copper bangles, and 1 conch shell. Other skeletons have only a few pots. These finds suggest that there was some difference in status amongst the people who were buried. Some were rich, others were poor, some chiefs, and others followers. Were some burial spots meant for certain families? Sometimes megaliths contain more than one skeleton. These indicate that people perhaps belonging to the same family were buried in the same place, though not at the same time. The bodies of those who died later were brought into the grave through the potholes. Stone circles or boulders placed on the surface probably served as signposts to find the burial site so that people could return to the same place whenever they wanted to. A special burial at Inamgaon. Find Inamgaon on map 2. It is a site on the river God, a tributary of the Bhima. It was occupied between 3600 and 2700 years ago. Here, adults were generally buried in the ground, laid out straight with the head towards the north. Sometimes burials were within the houses, vessels that probably contained food and water were placed with the dead. One man was found buried in a large four-legged clay jar in the courtyard of five-roomed house, one of the largest houses at the site. In the center of the settlement, this house also had a granary. The body was placed in a cross-legged position. Do you think this was the body of a chief? Give reasons for your answers. Occupations at Inamka. Archaeologists have found seeds of wheat, barley, rice, pulses, millets, peas, and sesame. Bones of a number of animals, many bearing cut marks that show they may have been used as food, have also been found. These include cattle, buffalo, goat, sheep, dog, horse, ass, pig, samar, spotted deer, blackbuck, antelope, hare, and mongoose. Besides bird, crocodile, turtle, crab, and fish, there is evidence that fruits such as bear, amla, jamun, dates, and a variety of berries were collected. Use this evidence to list the possible occupations of the people at Inamgao.